Good evening. The first time I was ever invited to a Hollywood party, the real kind, it was at the house of the legendary agent Irving Lazar. And I said to somebody, are there any rules to remember when you go to a party of that kind? And the person said, yes, one, try to sit next to Billy Wilder. He is high on the list of people I have always wanted to have on my show, and he is my guest this evening. Billy Wilder, Mr. Wilder, is one of Hollywood's great directors. His films include such classics as Some Like It Hot, The 7-Year Itch, Stalag 17, Irma La Douce, Lost Weekend, Sunset Boulevard, many, many others. His latest film is Buddy, Buddy, which reunites him with Walter Matthau and with Jack Lemmon, whom he first worked with in The Fortune Cookie in 1966 it was. And Mr. Wilder's incredibly long list of honors includes 6 Academy Awards and an amazing 20 Academy Award nominations. And if having directed these films and worked with great actresses from Garbo to Monroe isn't enough, Mr. Wilder has also lived a rich and extraordinarily interesting life. You could write 10 novels about him. He once actually interviewed Sigmund Freud, or partially. Perhaps we'll clear that up. Yeah, he lived in Berlin during the incredible 20s. He's befriended and collected the work of the finest artists of this century. Besides all that, his wit and fast tongue are truly legendary. This may not be his favorite, but he once said about France, it's a country where the money falls apart in your hand and you can't tear the toilet paper. So will you welcome, please, then, Mr. Billy Wilder. I don't know if in your collected quotations that's your favorite, but for me it would be hard to top.
It's sort of partially forgettable.
Okay. By the way, can I clear up something that's bothered me some? The idea of a small boy in Germany being called Billy seems a little incongruous, as if the scriptwriter made a mistake.
That's true. My second name is Wilder, which easily enough can be Americanized into Wilder. Mm-hmm. My mother had spent like about 15 years as a very young girl in America. Came back to Europe, married, had 2 sons. The older one was called Wilhelm, which would translate into William. That makes it even more complicated.
So there was a...
And that's my brother's name.
Yeah.
W. Lee Wilder, he calls himself now. And my name was... in my birth certificate was Samuel Wilder, but my mother, being very American, she called one Willie and the other one Billy, and that's the way it was. Okay. And I didn't want to interfere with that.
But I gather she liked America. She
yes,
instilled in you a desire to be there, did she? Or
well, of course.
Yeah.
But in those days, you know, when I was young, the idea of going to America, I mean, that was the dream of everybody. Yeah. That was like going to the moon, you know. When an American came to town, you know, you latched on to him. He was something very special. And it was just a wild dream to go to America. I mean, the whole thing changed after World War II. Just like it's going to change 5 years from now, it's going to be very difficult to run into somebody who had not been to China.
That's right.
They're all going there all the time. Either they have been or they will go. I'm unique among my friends. I've never been to China.
I am too, but I'm finding more and more that I'm the only person in a room of 4 people who hasn't been to China. Yeah, I hope it's still there when we get there. Would I be a different person now if I had gone through the Berlin of the 20s? It's always so frustrating when you read these books that say, oh, that was the time. There has never been anything like it. The decadence, the art, the decadent art, the wild people, the drugs, the entertainment, the fomenting literary movements, the various strange things that went on, the beauty of the city. How can I stand not having been there? That's a hard question.
Go and see Cabaret, read Brecht, listen to Schoenberg music.
Isherwood.
You will get the feeling. You know, look at some German expressionist. You will get the feeling. But indeed, it was it was something not to have missed. I'm delighted that I was there, I can tell you. And that goes, I mean, I spent, coming from Vienna, I went to Berlin in the middle 20s and stayed there until 33. I left the day after the Reichstag's fire.
Yeah.
I left because I was not very welcome there, I felt. Fortunately, I didn't have a German passport, so I could get out of there. Yeah. In 33, Hitler took over January 30th, and I left like in April, I think it was. But those years before, absolute total madness. I don't know, it was something, Berlin always had that great thing for me, even today. I was in the American Army when I went back to Berlin in 45. It's a very small part of the conquerors, an enormous feeling. But it's in the air. There's something about Berlin, about the Berliners, their humor, their apparent stark attitude toward everything, but rather correct. You know, so that there will be no misunderstandings. You know, Hitler was Austrian, and his backing came primarily from Bavaria. The Prussians behaved not too badly. I mean, I'm not here to ask forgiveness for them, but I felt less persecuted in Berlin, as a matter of fact, never persecuted, than I felt in Vienna when I grew up going to school there.
Yes. Vienna, why does Austria have a credit for being more anti-Semitic than Germany for some reason?
Because they are, or because they were.
That probably would contribute to the reputation.
No, because, and they don't even come out straight, kind of forward and say, well, yes, we were enthralled by the idea of one Germany, and we joined, and they will all tell you they have been raped. They have been subjugated by and against their will, and they try to protect whoever the minorities. They're not at all, no. But such is, you know, they like to talk about Emperor Francis Joseph, but they don't like to talk about those years of the Anschluss when they became a very militant part of the Bewegung, of the Nazi movement.
I picture the Berlin of the 20s as exotic dancers nude, dancing on tables at 3 a.m. In fact, I think that image comes from something I read about there was a woman, a young woman, who died eventually of heroin overdose, who was one of the first exotic dancers.
Anita Werber.
Yes, yes.
There was that dance in Werber and Droste, I think, were the names. Well, it was sort of the reaction after World War I. You know, when people say about drugs and heroin and cocaine, my God, we had that all there.
Yeah. You survived without becoming hooked on anything, apparently.
Who, me?
You yes, you apparently
well, I couldn't afford it.
Able to.
You know, since there was very little mugging in those days, and holding up pharmacies, it was a very expensive sport, you know. And I was much too young for that.
Much too young, yes. Thank you. Very nice answer. You know what's a mystery even today among sociologists and people who write learned essays and so on, is why did some Jews know to get out of Germany and others didn't, even when the people next door to them were hauled away?
They just could not believe for the longest time, in many cases for too long a time, until it was too late, that a thing like this can happen in the country of Goethe and Beethoven. They just could not believe that it was possible. Now, you must understand, you know, that the German Jews have been the most patriotic of the Germans, much more patriotic than the Germans themselves. There were more heroes in World War I who were Jewish, percentage-wise, naturally. No, an unbelievable number, and they were just assimilating themselves as quickly as they could. They did not like the Eastern Jews very much. They didn't think of living anyplace else but. Now, the peculiar thing, for instance, which will give you a little insight, The great hero of in German mythology is, if you've seen the Nibelungen, the Ring, the Reinhard, the Richard Wagner thing, was Siegfried, the great hero who killed the dragon.
Slew
You know,
the dragon.
the whole thing. You know,
Yeah.
you saw that. You know, by the hours. You know, in the Wagnerian operas, and in order to prove how German they were, they called their sons Siegfried. And it has since become a totally Jewish name. Anybody called Siegfried is Jewish. It was kind of named after the greatest hero in German mythology, and it sort of stamped them as. But they just did not, they could not grasp it. I, of course, ran as fast and as far as possible. Some of my friends, writers, newspapermen, they went to Vienna, because that was before the Anschluss, before the Germans marched. Then they went to Prague. They were the one tool they had was their language. They did not. It was a very, very risky thing to do for a writer, and I was a writer. In those days, I was a newspaperman. I wrote screenplays. You know, to move to a foreign country and be deprived of the language, you know, this is a tragic circumstance.
But you also said something I hadn't thought of, which is they could say, surely they won't do anything to us, or your father and your grandfather fought for this country and we live here.
Yeah, they paraded with medals from nothing helped them, believe me, absolutely nothing.
And yet you lost relatives, didn't you?
Yes, my mother and my grandmother and my stepfather, they died in Auschwitz, yes, in 1943. That time I lived in America, there was just nothing one could do.
Yeah. Have you ever had any desire to go to Auschwitz as a...
I have been to Auschwitz. I've been to Dachau in '45.
Yeah.
It's very touching, but it's very strange, you know, how people react to that things. Like a friend of mine told me that he went to see the Diary of Anne Frank, the play, and he went with a young man, not necessarily German. He was European, I think, or maybe American, I forget. And after the play, he said, well, would you believe that things like this could happen? And the guy just looked at him and says, well, let's hear the other side.
Let's hear the other side?
Yeah. This is kind of just a one man's perspective on that thing. Now let's be, you know, let's not rush to a judgment. How quickly it is forgotten.
Wow. Let's be fair to Hitler, in other words.
Well, no, let's be fair to the truth. Nobody is unless, and no, that we just had that, having that lawsuit, which they lost now, of that professor somewhere in Orange County who...
claimed it never happened?
Yeah, they claimed that the whole thing is, it was staged by some people in Hollywood. They got themselves some very hungry extras who had to play dead, or you showed their ribs. But the whole thing, you know, it was staged, the ovens, incredible.
It is amazing.
A professor yet.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, there are some professors who would be better off elsewhere. Was Marlene Dietrich one of the young figures of the 20s Berlin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Marlene...
Could you see then that this woman has star quality?
No, I couldn't. I couldn't. She does have star quality.
Can you now?
Yes, indeed.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
absolutely, indeed. You know, it's look, she is kind of an elementary thing, you know, in thinking about absolutely. But in those days, you know, she was in little actors who played smaller parts. Sternberg came to Berlin to shoot the Blue Angel. Originally, he wanted to do a whole different story, a different script, but then they settled on Heinrich Mann's Professor Unrat, which became the Blue Angel. And he saw her, he saw something in her, and he made her.
Yeah.
It is a whole different Marlene now than the one that we knew in the coffee houses and restaurants or the stages in Berlin.
And without him, she would probably not have been.
It needed that thing. That's the way it happens. You know? Like Louis B. Mayer, I understand, went to Europe and hired a Swedish director by the name of, I think Sestrem was his name. I would have to check up on that. But however, the director said, look, I cannot go to Hollywood without a young actress who's a friend of mine coming with me. I would be very lonely. I just couldn't do it. So in order to get that great director, Louis B. Mayer says, oh, the hell with it, bring her along. And that was Garbo. Now, the director has forgotten, but that was Garbo. But Marlene, and a very brave woman indeed, believe me, a very, very brave woman. I think that being the daughter of a Prussian general, she behaved incredibly correctly. Just she was a very, very moral, strong thing that we should be very proud of. And I saw her during the war. You know, she was entertaining troops. You know, in 44, 45, yes. And for years she didn't want to go back to Germany. She's quite something.
Yes. So you admire her
very much.
More ways than one. About Garbo, here's something I've heard two versions of. One is that if you walked on the set and watched her shooting a film, you would be stunned, yeah. And other people have said, it looks like she isn't doing anything. And then you see the film printed the next day, and there's this magical thing happening, and you couldn't see it there, but she knew in some instinctual way. Is the truth somewhere in between, or what was your experience with it?
First let me correct the thing, because I cannot take credit. You said I directed among all the people, male stars, female stars.
I
never directed Garbo. I was one of the writers on Ninachka.
Yeah.
And one day I came on the set, Lubitsch was directing it, and she was a very private person. She sensed that there was a stranger on the set. And she just whispered something to somebody. And as I was standing and watching the scene, suddenly 4 guys came up and put up a blackboard between me and the scene that was going on. She just didn't want to be watched. Well, there's something very, very magic about that curious element X, you know, that if we knew what it was, if we could patent it, if we could reproduce it, we would have many Garbos and many stars, many Streisands, many Crawfords, many Shirley Temple. It's been tried and tried, you know. Same hairdo, prettier, dances better, but it's just not Shirley Temple, you know. They brought all of those kids on. You remember those waves. It's something that you could not foresee how it works on the screen. Now, Gary Cooper, for instance, was another one like this. You know, you watched him play a scene and he did nothing. But then you watched the rushes next day, and there was that tremendous thing coming off. A whole different thing than what you saw with your naked eye.
Is there anything you can learn from that? Like the best rule is to underact on the screen, or anything? Or is it simply that certain personalities have it?
Yeah, it's kind of that magnetic thing, you know, something that grabs the audience's interest. That sort of where you have to watch with great fascination, where you just can't help yourself. You don't want to take your eyes off that person. And you're born with that thing.
Did you find that Garbo had that same quality in person? You've met her, I know.
Yes, I've met her quite a few times. Well, no, but you see, by this time, you know, you superimpose, you know it's Garbo, so it's very difficult. You know, it says, who is that? You know it's Garbo, so you already look at her differently.
Yeah. I just wonder if a stranger meeting her would be overwhelmed by that same thing, or does it have to take, it requires the camera on the screen?
No, not unless she walked down Fifth Avenue and she's walking there in a big, large brimmed hat with the veil because she doesn't want to be recognized, and 8 people are running after her, and then you just look, says, what's that? You says, that's Garbo, and you join those people and you run after her.
Would you have wanted to have a love affair with her if you could?
Garbo?
Yeah.
What a fantastic idea.
Sorry, I don't know.
I would not, but I tell you something very peculiar. That the great stars, the truly great female stars, are the ones that are both admired, desired by the male and the female part of the audience. By that I mean, if my wife found out that I had an affair with Garbo or with Monroe, whom she loved,
Yeah.
she would be rather proud of her husband. However, if she heard that I had an affair with I'm not going to mention names, but kind of in the bimbo class of girls, she would never forgive me.
Yes.
She would be very proud. She would go to the hairdresser and would say, hey, my husband slept with Garbo. Isn't that terrific?
Yeah.
She's very proud. Sure.
If not, take an ad in Daily Variety or something.
There's that
Yeah.
story, with that couple. They just got married, and they come out of the church, and he turns to the wife and says, honey, darling, sweetheart, I swear I will never, never, never cheat on you with anybody. Maybe with Garbo. And the wife says, me too. And it's a third section. It's something
Says something
totally,
about
yeah.
it, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah. Well, that's wonderful, and I think your wife is an extraordinarily admirable woman.
No, it is
I guess the point is that she
it's
isn't
beyond
it?
sex, It's kind
Yeah.
of, I don't know.
It's partaking of a myth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I said at the beginning, and I realize it was partially accurate, that you interviewed Sigmund Freud. Now, the fact that I can be sitting next to a man who was this close to Sigmund Freud
Well,
seems almost as strange to me as if you said you had interviewed General Custer or Columbus.
not at all.
Because
no.
he seems like such a mythic figure who maybe existed in an opera rather than in real life.
Yeah, but remember, that was 1925,
Yeah.
That was before the Freudian thing kind of jumped across the borders, This was, in those days, I didn't know anybody who had been analyzed. But I was a very young newspaperman in Vienna those days, and we were doing, I will make the story as short as possible, we were doing for the Christmas number, as they did every year, they would have one topical question. And then they would send the young reporters out to interview people to get their attitude toward that question and answer to that. I remember the question. The question was, what do you think of that newfangled political movement called fascism and the man of the hour in Italy, Mussolini? That was the question.
It's a nice Christmas question.
Yeah, not Christmas question, but it was not all that serious in those days. Little fascism, was a brand new kind of, just like psychoanalysis.
That's right. A lot of history hadn't taken place.
Absolutely. So I went within a period of a day or 2 days by streetcar, believe me, not to think, where reporters had automobiles and stuff like that. The owner of the paper had the automobile, but no, we went by streetcar. And I saw within a day or two, I forget, I saw Schnetzler, I saw Richard Strauss, I saw a fellow analyst, Adler, and I also saw Professor Freud.
Incredible
Now,
list.
this is just, this is kind of, you can live a whole life wanting to meet those people, but it didn't mean that much to me in those days. So now I went to see Freud. It was lunchtime. And as all doctors in Middle Europe are, also in London and in Paris some, they function out of their apartments. The living room is the waiting room. The study is, they don't have offices, or they didn't have. I don't know, maybe they have now. He had an apartment on the Berggasse 19 in the 9th district, arrondissement in Vienna. And I went there kind of very innocently. I kind of walked up the steps there, second or third floor. I rang the doorbell. And the maid answered. I gave her my visiting card. And I says, Herr Wilder, I'm from the newspaper, Die Stunde was the name of the paper. I would like to see Professor Freud. She says, come in. And she led me into the salon, which was also the waiting room. And I knew, I could smell that there was a terrific lunch going on someplace there in the apartment. And I was waiting, and I looked, and there was a door ajar, and through that crack in the door, I could see the couch. It was a tiny little couch with the little Turkish carpet, kind of tiny. He must have been must have been specializing, analyzing midgets or children. It was tiny. It was never.
This is his early stages.
Yeah. And I was just kind of reading. I knew vaguely about Freud. I didn't know too much about him.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly a door opened and Freud came in. Small man himself, beard. He had his napkin tucked under his shirt, you know, very European, you know, kind of like you read it in novels of Thomas Mann or Balzac, for that matter. You know, this is the bourgeois family. And he had the visiting card in his hand. And he said, Herr Wilder, and I said, jawohl, Herr Professor. And he says, dort ist die Tür, there is the door. And I made a short little bow, and I walked out. And that was it. There is the door. He threw me out. Now, in retrospect, I think it is much more honorable to be thrown out by Freud than be given a state dinner by Colonel Gaddafi. You agree with that, right?
Yes, if you have your choice.
Oh, yeah, if you have the choice, always.
Yeah. Or if you have dinner with Gaddafi, keep your eye on the door. So Freud gave you the heave-ho.
He gave me the heave-ho, and he hated newspaper men anyway. They were poking slight fun at him, and he just didn't like any they misquoted him. And it was one of those he never talked to newspapermen, as I found out subsequently. They knew when they sent me, oh boy, is he going to get it? And I got it.
That's quite an abrupt heave-ho, though. I wonder if he felt guilty afterwards and had to talk to Adler about it.
Oh, Adler, I've never, that 16 pages of answer. A drivel master. He was just going all over the place. Oh.
A drivel master?
Yeah, well, kind of driveling on and on and on. Yeah. But, of course, nobody points to me and says, hey, there's a man who had an interview with Adler.
Tomorrow night, Billy Wilder will delight us all again as he crosses the Atlantic, goes directly to Hollywood, and reminisces about Swanson, Monroe, Bogey, Bacall, the greatly missed Claude Rains, and much else that is fun and fascinating to hear. Join us. Tonight, we continue this rare opportunity to capture the wit and charm of Billy Wilder on television, and we will start right up with the subject of famous roles. There are always stories about famous movies, which we can only think of one way. I mean, you only think of Bette Davis in All About Eve, and yet you hear that someone else was offered the part. In fact, I think Claudette Colbert.
That's right. Colbert was offered the part, that's right.
And I can only think of Sunset Boulevard, of course, as Gloria Swanson, and yet she was not the first choice, I learned.
Well, she was, in a sense, the second choice. When we were talking very vaguely about the concept of the picture, but as we mapped it out in more detail, as it fell into a first, second, and third act, and the scenes got to be written, the original concept, which was Mae West, I think, and then subsequently it was between three former big stars. Yeah. Mary Pickford, then Paula Negri, and then Swanson. It then kind of, I made a test with Swanson, it was clearly Swanson. But, you know, the remarkable thing about it is, I was just thinking about it the other day, that as you think back, and please don't, to the picture, no, because I never look at my old pictures, but people do talk about that picture. It was about an old, washed-out star with the sound coming in and she being a silent picture actor, is finished and kaput. Now, very few people realize that Swanson was but 50 years old when she played that part. She's 82 now, and the picture was made 32 years ago. In other words, Swanson, when she made that picture, was younger than, say, for instance, Audrey Hepburn is today. Isn't that astonishing?
That is, that takes me a moment to get my mind around.
She was but 50. But we had that big chasm that worked for us, namely the transition from silent pictures, the people that fell by the wayside, and when the sound came in.
It's also ironic that she tested for it. I suppose everyone has thought of the joke, if she hadn't gotten the part, would you have told her you only wanted her car? But
yeah, there is a part of, there's a little bit of that in the picture itself, too. Yeah. The Isotta Fraschini car. And the pleasure she was to work with, just marvelous. I loved working with her.
Who are some of the worst people to work with?
You know, I'd like to tell you just one thing, you know, that I have very much like some of our presidents, I have a penchant, you know, every time I open my mouth, I put my foot in it. So I better be very careful, you know. I rather not tell you the worst people.
I can understand that.
It's very, very difficult because the moment may come where I need them desperately. You say, oh, you said something nasty about me on that Cavett show, so just get lost. No, there are no. There's some more temperamental people, some more difficult people, some more complex people, some easy people. They're all very different, you know. This is like a doctor dealing with patients. It's not, one patient is different from the other one. They all kind of have their own personality. Surely the ones with the talent, the stars, you know, they're all totally different. They have to be treated differently.
I read something you said once that someone was saying, how could you work with someone terribly temperamental? And you said, my grandmother could be on time and know her lines and be ready when we're ready to start, but she wouldn't necessarily be Marilyn Monroe, I think it was, in fact.
It was Monroe, yes.
And in other words, that you, somewhere there's the line, to the talented much will be forgiven.
Well, when it's all over and when it works, you know, it's you're not sore at the dentist after your teeth are all shiny and fixed and everything is just marvelous. No, you don't want to strangle him
right.
while he's drilling in your tooth. You know, you're suffering. But when it's all over, you walk down the elevator. I mean, you go down the elevator, walk down the street, you whistle, you're happy. So that's the result is the only thing that really matters.
Yeah.
And angry as I got with Monroe and a few other female and male stars, you know, if the results warrant the trouble you had, it's all forgotten after that. But then again, I worked with some very pleasant people. The hosting was just an absolute delight. It was a sleigh ride. But the picture stunk, and whenever I think of them, you know, I get so angry. God damn it! You know how it is. You know,
Maybe if they'd been more temperamental.
Yeah, because you kind of you superimpose on that thing. You know, there is a very famous story of a Goldwyn story, and this is a true one. You know, where he asked a writer. I think the name of the writer was Eddie Shadroff. Very good screenwriter. Some years back. And Goldwyn asked him to write a script. He says, I had 10 writers work on that thing. Nobody can solve it. Maybe you can. And he read the 10 scripts and went to Goldwyn and said, Mr. Goldwyn, abandon that picture. I read all of the scripts, and I was thinking about myself. There's no solution. You're just going to, believe me, you're just going to lose all your money. It's going to be a total flop. And Goldwyn did not listen, got another right, and finally made the picture. And the picture was a total flop. And he's now preparing another picture, and an agent suggests Mr. Shadroff. He says, Shadroff, that son of a bitch, he reminds me of my worst picture I've ever made. He warned him not to do it. But that was the kind of thought connection.
I see. There's still a fascination with Marilyn Monroe. As we sit here now, there was just still another television movie about her, and not bad from what I saw without, of course, I never knew the woman. Are there sides of her that haven't been finally exposed publicly? Is there, what am I trying to say? Could you see what her tragedy was when you knew her in ways that haven't been perceived or told?
Well, let me, as I mentioned before, putting the foot in my mouth, I lived through a kind of a horrifying moment. I was flying from New York to Paris to make a picture there. And I arrived in Paris, it was on a Sunday, I think. I arrived in Paris. There were like 6 or 8 newspapermen there. And they all jumped on me. Tell us about Monroe. I was rather surprised, you know. I didn't like to talk about Monroe, but and 6 or maybe 1 or 2 newspapermen when Wilder arrives in Paris. No such big thing. And on the way to the hotel, I turned to my collaborator, Ariel Diamond, and I said, "What was all that questioning about?" And I kind of really let go. And there I see the L'Intransigeant, the Paris Press, the afternoon papers. While I was flying, she had committed suicide. That's why they asked me those questions without telling me that she had committed suicide. I got caught there, you know, so I would certainly not have answered those questions, or certainly not that way, if you know what I mean.
You mean they had said, let's not tell him, he may not know,
Yeah,
do you think, conspired to...
I don't know whether,
really?
they did not tell me. They just started asking questions about Monroe, and I just answered, not knowing that that
Wow.
poor girl was dead.
Ooh.
So she was a very complex, very unhappy person, with marvelous moments, with a great gift for comedy. She, without too much training, and that's even before she went to that Strasbourg university, she knew where the joke was, you know. She read the lines just magically. And of course, there was that great innocence with just totally unaware of the bazooms and the behind and the figure and the lushness of the whole thing. There was something very sweet about her. She could also be very mean. She could be very mean to assistant directors. She could be, she had no sense of time, very late always. Sometimes kind of a line would block her retention. She would be unable to get past a line, you know. You needed all the patience you could have, but you could not recast. I mean, there's no such thing has happened since Monroe, and I don't think it will happen very soon.
Is the miracle that somebody like that perishes the way she did, or is the miracle that more people don't in Hollywood?
Well, she was a special case, you know.
Yeah.
But it is extremely difficult for stars of that magnitude to find the great third act. In fact, she did have a third act. Carol Lombard had I mean, it was a tragic third act, but there was some kind of a curtain. I know other big stars, you know, they married airline pilots and have retired to Texas, have married very rich, have disappeared. But what do you do? I mean, where is that Götterdämmerung? How does that happen? Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And when I see those great beauties, the great stars, sometimes they still show up in small parts on television or in movies, and I say, my God, that was blah blah. I don't believe it. She suddenly weighs 109. I didn't want her to play that. I wanted to remember her the way she was. Yeah. It's very, very difficult, you know. It's easier maybe for the male star than for the females.
Probably, for a woman to get that high and to get down
difficult.
gracefully is...
very difficult. I think that Betty Davis is doing a super job, you know. She's very professional, and she just finds the right part, and she just kind of pulls through. She just does not retire. But the beauties, the great beauties, you know, it's a tragedy.
What about, it's fun to pick your brains about these legendary personalities, pardon the cliche. You're supposed to have had some problems with Bogart in working with him. Was he
Bogart,
troublesome?
yeah, Bogart was tough too.
Yeah.
I did not become a intimate friend of Bogart's, and only then, when I became an intimate friend of his, did I see that this guy was indeed a man of tremendous courage and guts, and that was when he was dying.
Yeah.
He did not want to play the part. We did a picture together with Audrey Hepburn and Bill Holden and Bogart. We did Sabrina.
Sabrina, yeah.
And he did not quite want to play that part, but since I'd worked with Bogart, rather with Holden and with Hepburn before, he thought that I was siding with them, that we had drinks after after the shooting, and we excluded him, that we had a little clique. And he was just not a very friendly guy in those days. He would kind of...
Hard to imagine him insecure, though.
you can't imagine.
It's hard to imagine that he would be
He was
insecure.
terribly insecure. There was once a New Year's Eve party. A friend of mine, he's dead now, a writer by the name of Charles Lederer. I'm sure you heard of him. He gave a New Year's Eve party every year, or every other year. Everybody came. Small house on Bedford, and there were always hundreds of people invited. And among them were also, I mean, every star in town came, like the old Spiegel parties, but Spiegel had moved to London, so Lederer took over those big New Year's Eve parties. And there was every star in Hollywood, and also the Shah of Iran was invited to that with his retinue, and I remember dancing on the floor, packed, and there was people, and there comes a word that you're going to have to bleep out, but it doesn't matter to me. I saw out of the corner of my eye, I saw Betty Bicall dancing with the Shah, and as they were dancing, he was a rather small man. He said to her, he says, "You dance beautifully." And she says, "You bet your ass, Shah." So that I just heard. Then suddenly there was a little commotion, and what had happened was that some Canadian Air Force cadets who had been training somewhere in Orange County had also, they were not invited. They just kind of
Crashed the party?
Crashed the party. There they were. And there was one kid about, I don't know, 5'2", and he kind of with acne and seeing stars, you know, he was just going from one star to another, pinching their behinds, you know, just kind of drunk at the elation. They're all there, right? And she grabbed that kid, and she said, "Boogie, you know what that guy just did to me?" And Boogie got into a little bit, and the guy said, "Oh, shut up," the cadet said, the Canadian cadet, and slapped Bogart's face. And he says, "Get the police." And somebody got to the, and he hid in the toilet, watching. And when the police came and took the cadets out, he opened the door. He was the great hero. "Out, out, you sons of bitches, out!" So he was not the great hero then, no?
Well, I think that speaks well for him.
Yeah,
I mean,
he defended the honor of his wife as much as he could.
Yes,
But,
it
no,
only
he
shows
was
what a wonderful actor
he
was.
liked to incite people. He would put one, he would kind of needle one against the other and watch them fight it out. But he himself would not partake in anything physical.
So it shows he was a supreme actor on the
Very
screen.
good, very, very good.
Yeah. You were friends with Peter Lorre, and to
Yes.
me he remains one of the most attractive, it's not really the right word, but compelling figures who's ever been on the screen, back from the movie M, where he's a child murderer, up through everything he did, it seems. He
Yes,
just,
that was that little ensemble that they had at Warner Brothers, you know, with Bogart and
Green Street and Laurie and the whole...
Naturally, that was the thing that was traveling through Morocco, Casablanca, and with Peter Lorre, great friend of mine from Berlin, where he made M. And when we first came here and were desperately trying to learn English, we were just completely shut off. We were staying, we had one room together at the Chateau Marmont. And the question was, who's going to get the dime for the can of Campbell tomato soup, you know? We were living like that. But he just was a... he had that uniqueness, you know, that he had, and Stroheim had, and Sig Ruman had, you know, were actors irreplaceable. But, you know, those guys, they will never come again, you know. It is sad to have Garbo not act anymore. It's sad to have lost so many great actors and actresses. But one of the saddest, for instance, is my great favorite actor, Claude Rains. When the Rains left, you know, a whole slew of pictures could not be made anymore. An incredible, incredible thing there, you know, just a great force. I mean, he in Casablanca or Mr. Skeffington or whatever, or even without seeing his face, the Invisible Man.
Invisible Man.
Absolutely super.
Did those people realize, do you suppose, how beloved they were, or how deified they are now by film buffs and?
Absolutely. You know what was not very good in our remembrance gets worse. What was good, kind of to switch for a second to baseball, if you don't mind, and we better because the game may not be rained out.
This will give you a clue when we're taping this.
Yes. I tell you now, for instance, Koufax. You know, Koufax was a marvelous pitcher. You know, but in our recollection, and it all was kind of geometrically magnified. He's deified now, you know. It was a very good picture, but when he was pitching, and when we knew him, when we talked to him, say, it was just, you did not know that there was Freud plus Rains plus Garbo, right?
Right. It's funny you mentioned it. I remember doing a show with Betty Davis once in which she said, somehow when Claude Rains died, it just seemed to be the end of an era for
Absolutely.
me.
I didn't hear, I didn't know she said that, but how true it was. And other actors, if I may, because everybody always talks about the same 10 top stuff, but what was underneath, you know, how solid it was. When you were all through with a scene between Betty Davis and, let us say, Claude Rains, on came George Sanders. You know, they came, really big trumps were played there. They were just all tremendous, tremendous actors.
That's right. It doesn't seem like that sort of strength and character acting is around.
No.
Maybe one or two exceptions and some survivors of that era.
Yeah, but the great supporting actor now is the star and owns the company and has a series that goes for 5 years, you know. He does not want to be a supporting actor anymore.
Billy, you've been certainly been, as every career in Hollywood, both up and down. What are the signs that you start to feel around town when, say, let's say you do a turkey right after Sunset Boulevard? I don't know if you happen to, or if you've ever done a real turkey.
No,
but,
you're incorrect. It was not one turkey. There were quite a few turkeys.
Oh, there was a flock, was there?
Yeah, well, sure. You know how it goes.
But when you're, especially when you're established, as you are, as a legendary director, then what do you start to feel? Do you get a poorer seat at parties, or?
The policeman at the gate does not smile quite as readily as he, if he was at the preview of Some Like It Hot, let's say, or The Apartment, he's a little bit friendlier. No, it means absolutely nothing to me. It's just, it throws me for a short loop, but then I just gather myself together. It hurts naturally, but I just shorten my grip. I change my stance. I say to myself, maybe I need some contact lenses. But then I play winter ball in the Dominican Republic, and back I come again. I hope. I just I don't give up. You know, I just go on because it's too late, and I certainly don't want to sit on benches and feed pigeons.
There are people who will see that the pigeons get something to eat. You knew F. Scott Fitzgerald, too, which is...
F. Scott Fitzgerald was at Paramount when I was a writer. I was then working with my longtime collaborator, Charles Brackett, and he was a friend of Scott Fitzgerald's, who was working on a script at Paramount, and every afternoon we would go down from the fourth floor, which was the top writers. The top writers were on the fourth floor of the writers' building, and we would go across the street to a place called Oblat's, and we would have our coffee, and we would talk. That was shortly before he died.
What sort of shape was Fitzgerald in those days?
He was pale and shaky and distraught. He was in the typical shape of a Hollywood writer. Not any different.
No worse, no better.
No worse. Whenever you see a writer who's got a good sunburn and he's very strong. You know, that's a writer without too much talent. He can jog and lie there on the thing. The other ones are bent over their Olivetti trying to squeeze out a scene.
You don't get tan from the
No,
Olivetti.
you don't. When anybody, any picture writer who is tan, forget it. Give me the pale ones.
Get me 4 pale writers.
Yeah, 4 pale writers here.
Speaking of drunks, which is an unfortunate and blunt way to put it, but I guess true in Fitzgerald's case and Chandler's, the legendary Raymond Chandler.
Yeah.
Also, did
with
you
him.
collaborate on?
Yes, we wrote and I directed Double Indemnity, yes.
Yeah, yeah. But you collaborated on the script as well.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we worked the script from an original novella by James Cain, which he wrote for Liberty magazine right after Postman Always Rings Twice, and a rather similar theme. Yeah. I wanted to work with Cain on it, but Cain was working at Fox on another picture. So my producer came up with Chandler. He was then up and coming, and I read all of his short stories in Black Mask magazine and his novels. And oh, he was something, I tell you. Marvelous writer, just wonderful. But he was a nut. He was tough.
How was he a stranger man than Erich von Stroheim, who apparently?
Oh, yeah, much stranger. Von Stroheim, I could curse him in German. You know, there was a communication, but that's the first time that when I worked with Chandler, that Chandler had been inside the studio. He lived somewhere in Hollywood, but never been inside the studio. Wrote his novels right after. You know, first he was stringing tennis rackets for Spalding somewhere in San Francisco, but a super writer, just a wonderful talent, but very difficult.
Lady in the Lake is a classic, isn't it?
All of them, the Brasher, the Balloon, the Big Sleep, you know, just a wonderful mood, just Hammett and Chandler and James Cain in that period, my favorites, naturally.
Yeah. What about the strange, we read these weird things about von Stroheim's various fetishes and things.
A man of weird slants on things. Best explained, you know, there's a picture he made. All of the pictures were just unique, you know. They were fascinating. Sometimes, you know, they were just too repellent for its day, you know. I remember a picture, I think it was Blind Husbands, I think. And here's the opening of the picture. An Austrian lieutenant, played by Stroheim, in an elevator. And he had sort of a cape on, and you know, the Austrian uniforms. And he's in that elevator, and a gentleman and a lady, beautifully gowned, enter the elevator on the floor. And the guy takes his hat off, and as the elevator goes down, he looks at Stroheim and finally says, "Don't you know better than not to take your hat off when a lady is present?" And he slaps his face. And Stroheim just stares at him. Elevator arrives downstairs. The lady and the gentleman walk out, and as Stroheim gets out of the elevator, the cape sort of opens a little, and you see he's got no arms. That's just for openers, you know. Kind of, ooh.
That's the first laugh.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of mind that he had.
Wow.
But he was kind of a man possessed, and in many respects a genius, but then ultimately so expensive, such a perfectionist, or trying to do so many things for which the audience in those days certainly was not ready, that he was let go. But when I made a picture with him, I remember in the early 40s, 5 Graves to Cairo, where Stroheim played General Rommel. And I was a great admirer of his, but I had never met him. He had arrived from Paris for that part. And I was shooting in India. I was shooting some tank stuff, and I came back to the studio, and they told me Stroheim has arrived, and he's now at Western costume, being outfitted in his uniform, you know, the Desert Fox, you know, Rommel. And I run up to Western costume around the corner from Paramount, right on Melrose here. And I see him there, and I clicked my heels, and I said, Herr von Stroheim, I mean, this is just What a marvelous moment to meet you, and what a tremendous honor, you know, that little I should now be directing the great Stroheim. And he just stared at me, and to make him feel at ease, he says, your problem was that you were 10 years ahead of your time. And he looked at me and said, 20? That was Stroheim, you know?
That was your meeting.
Yeah, that was Stroheim. Or then
But
he would, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too, that at this point we have, to put it bluntly, run out of tape for the moment. And so we shall have to say goodbye temporarily. I hope it's only...
You want me to get the hell
I hope it's only temporarily. We were out of tape, and Billy Wilder was out of time. He said that he would come again, and I certainly intend to ask him. Thank you, Billy Wilder, and good night.